Hello, and welcome to the Meaning Project podcast with Dr. Dan. I am your host, Dr. Daniel A. Franz, and I'm betting you already know because I can assume if you're listening or watching a podcast that says titled Homo Noeticus 2, at the very least, you've listened to Homo Noeticus 1 and maybe even a few other of the podcasts. So therefore, it is my great honor and pleasure to bring a little bit of mental health and meaning to your day. So thank you for that opportunity. You also know that as part of the podcast, I have a Patreon page as well as a merch store. And check this out, just got notification today for the Patreon page. If you're a Patreon supporter, those very cool looking ceramic mugs just went into production today, way ahead of schedule. I don't think we were expecting those until October, but now I am hearing that they may be done in the next few weeks. So if you're interested in that, you will see on the Patreon page sometime soon that the really kind of ugly looking imprint of the mug right now will become a true photograph of an actual mug, ceramic mug, handmade ceramic mug that we will have as part of the Patreon offerings. And of course, as you can see, I'm drinking from The Meaning Project podcast coffee mug already this morning. So, if you've listened to Homo Noeticus 1, let's get on to number 2, the conclusion of the wonderful Dr. Ann V. Graeber's speech to the World Congress of Logotherapy back in 2005. And look, if you haven't listened to number 1 yet, do yourself a favor and go back to it. You might be a little bit at a loss here, listening to Homo Noeticus 1. But onward, she talks about this global awakening to our interconnectedness. She says there are additional factors aiding the rapid changes we are encountering on every front. And I think we all know we are experiencing very rapid changes in life and culture and in history right now. This was written back in 2005. We're almost 20 years past that. Think of the changes we've experienced. She says, please consider this. It is estimated that in Europe, during the Middle Ages, only about 3% of the population were literate. Then came the Great Awakening, the Renaissance, which gave us new insights on many frontiers. It also brought about Gutenberg's invention of the printing press. Since then, the literacy rate has been rising steadily, making the preservation and dissemination of knowledge and its transmission from generation to generation possible with greater accuracy and speed than before. The printing press, I can't help but giggle, you guys. She's talking about the printing press back in 2005. What has the technology of the internet and smartphones and laptops and podcasts and YouTube done to continue the transmission of information from generation to generation, ensuring accuracy and speed? It's amazing, just within 20 years. The printing press did much to usher in the industrial age and subsequently the space age. Other factors that have greatly facilitated experiential learning are better communications and safer and faster means of travel. Again, this is 05, and here we are now. Every one of us has all of the knowledge of the entire human history pretty much in the palm of our hand. It's amazing. During the last 20 years, the world has witnessed yet another phenomenon that will even outstrip the benefits of the printing press. Here she goes. The internet, with its potential for instantaneous transmission of information around the world, barely out of its infancy, can we even begin to imagine what its capacity for bridging cultures and bridging people together in dialogue will be in the future. The information age is upon us. It is initiating complex and multi-phasic processes. We can certainly see it happening year by year, that our lives and our societies are becoming more complex and multifaceted. Yet at the same time, there's a growing understanding that we are interconnected. Humanity is closely related in spite of seeming differences. I got to tell you, that's a I don't know, back in 2005. Where are we now in 2022? Unfortunately, the internet has yielded quite a few negatives. Maybe because we are infants in our ability to use social media, we're really good with the negatives, but also been a lot of positives too in passing on information. It was indeed an epic moment in history for all humankind to see pictures of our beautiful planet, the Earth, spinning in space gracefully and majestically for the first time. It mattered little what national origin we claimed to have. Seeing the Earth, our common home, without artificially drawn boundaries or lines of division, was awe-inspiring. It called forth a response from a depth within humanity collectively, which we had not experienced before, a sense of monanthropism, or oneness of humankind emerged. Suddenly we realized that we were all citizens of Earth on a voyage in space. What is the goal of our journey? What is the meaning of our existence? What is our vocation of destiny? Remember the marula we talked about in the last podcast? There is something awesomely similar between these two spheres, the marula and the Earth, as she has in her speech here. One representing the microcosm, the other the macrocosm of our earthly existence. At the marula stage, the clustered cells were poised to undergo a profound change, a metamorphosis for the benefit of the entire organism. Boy, there are some of you running now that just had a chuckle at that one. For the benefit, I really need to call Rabbi B up here and have him do some analysis on that one. Let's start that one over. At the marula stage, the clustered cells were poised to undergo a profound change, a metamorphosis for the benefit of the entire organism. As the individual human beings clustered on the earth, have we also reached a point where we are poised to undergo a profound change? This time, a transformation of consciousness for the greater benefit of all. Like the cells of the marula, we look at the vast possibilities of the future, of who we may yet become, with awe and trepidation. Only one thing is certain: we cannot remain the same. We wonder, what is the part that is mine to play in this grand scheme of things? What call to meaning do I hear? Dr. Viktor Frankl talks all the time about the idea of becoming in his neodynamics and those existential dynamics, that tension of where we are now and who we want to be and what we shall become. And Dr. Graeber speaks of it right here, but on a global level. Are we evolving into this greater consciousness? She goes on to say, human consciousness has left the marula stage behind. It is differentiating and individuating, validating Viktor Frankl's belief that each person is unique and that there is a demand quality to life which we are all called to respond. I was just talking about this the other day in my my men's substance abuse group, that we, the idea that Dr. Frankl tells us, what is it that life is asking of us? Not that what we ask of life, what we demand from life, but what is life asking from us? What does our response need to be? What is that responsible action we need to take? She goes on to say that taking that leap, a leap towards self-transcendence, will require uncommon courage and spiritual fortitude. It will be liberating, while at the same time, it will bring new responsibilities in its wake. One thing is predictable: we will have to start thinking globally, not provincially or parochially. Self-transcendence calls for inclusion of others, not exclusion, for reconciliation and not division. And if you remember in the last podcast, I talked about Dr. Michio Kaku on the Rogan podcast, and this is a lot of what he talks about in the phases of the evolution of culture and society, that we are barely at what he calls a level 1 culture, society, or planet. And this is a lot of what Dr. Graeber is talking about, that this leap of self-transcendence, learning, realizing, behaving in a way that we realize we're all interconnected. And it's not just for ourselves or our local community, it's more about the global community. She goes on to say, how will we recognize Homo Noeticus? She says, persons with a noetic consciousness relate to others from their core. They sense their own human dignity and acknowledge it in others as a matter of course. They are inner directed, not looking to external authorities to tell them what to do or to believe. They exhibit spiritual poise. They have mastered the first axial precept of know thyself. They know who they are. At the same time, they're open to change. Change to what they are capable of becoming. Such attitudinal changes are prerequisites for what is to follow. The second axial imperative appears to be commit thyself, or stated in contemporary language, be responsible. This becomes evident in the value changes and their implementations brought about by a higher spiritual intelligence and noetic sensitivity, that idea of our interconnectedness to something greater. The following examples highlight observable shifts in consciousness that are occurring or have occurred during the preceding century. Being inner-directed and self-motivated, instead of looking to external authority for directives, is reflected in the decline of autocratic forms of government. Worldwide, the monarchies have largely crumbled in favor of governance by representation. Dictatorships are slowly yielding to republics, democracies, and other social constructs where the governed have a voice in decision-making. Her next point says, acknowledging the logos, the source of meaning, the spiritual core in ourselves and others, is leading to the advocacy of human rights. Slavery has been legally abolished in all countries of the world as of 1968. My God, 1968, just a little over 50 years ago. How tragic in the sense of humanity, but as we look forward, this idea that we've enslaved each other for so long throughout human history, and just now in the past 50 years, have we realized how inhumane that is. And I think that shows us just how infantile we are in our consciousness, in our care for each other, and how far we have to go. But we're on a path. Thank goodness it did happen in 1968. It would have been better if it was earlier. It was not, but we're moving forward in positive directions, I hope. Protective labor laws are being implemented. Child labor is being frowned upon. Medical care and social services are becoming increasingly available to people around the world as the decades go by. It's amazing to think these social programs that some of us frown upon, some of us raise up, are such an important part of taking care of each other, of this idea of global consciousness. And again, if we are in our infancy in this consciousness and just realizing treating each other poorly, enslaving each other is bad, how infantile are we in our thinking of taking care of each other, taking care of those less fortunate? Again, it's an interesting path to be on to see where this might go. She goes on to say, a shift from self-centeredness to self-transcendence will inevitably usher in attitudes of greater cooperation and less competition, individually and collectively. Matters that concern all of us, such as ecological devastation, containing the spread of communicable diseases, dear God, I forgot about this line, and avoiding pandemics are being addressed. That's chilling. To think that she wrote about that in 2005 and saw that we were addressing these things, believe we were addressing these things. Cooperative exploration of space is happening between formerly hostile nations, and now we live in a time when it's happening in private companies. In the wake of natural disasters and catastrophes, we have seen an unprecedented outpouring of empathy and relief efforts on a massive scale in every part of the globe recently. For Dr. Graeber, these are all examples of this growing evolution from Homo sapien to Homo Noeticus to understanding the collective needs of our world and our interconnectedness with each other. The above mentioned examples transcend national boundaries, point to our ecological interconnectedness and economic interdependence. They unite us in common intent for the well-being of all humanity. We can deduce from these verifiable examples, that persons aspiring to a noetic consciousness find meaning and fulfillment by responding to what Viktor Frankl called the demand quality of life to the best of their ability. They are moving from self-absorption to self-transcendence for the greater good of all concerned. So such qualities will be characteristic of Homo Noeticus. Although widespread, we cannot expect this transformation in consciousness from Homo sapiens to Homo Noeticus to occur suddenly. It will be a gradual development that will take place across cultures, disciplines, and faith traditions. Even though we may not live to see the emergence en masse, we can assist Homo Noeticus in the process of awakening one by one, thereby honoring Viktor Frankl's vision of what the human being is capable of becoming, individually and collectively. Dr. Ann B. Graeber, diplomate in logotherapy, was a plenary presenter at the 15th World Congress of Logotherapy in Dallas, Texas in 2005, commemorating Viktor E. Frankl's birth a century before. Her presentation addressed the Congress theme from Homo sapiens to Homo Noeticus, emergence of higher human consciousness. What a beautiful and powerful vision, and what a question for each one of us to listen and try to understand. How do we contribute to that? And I would say my answer for all of us is to look to self-transcendence, look to take responsible action. Again, another idea I was talking about in group last week, this week, was the idea of finding meaningful. We have the ability to decide. You've heard me say this before. Every moment we have the opportunity to decide meaningfully, to choose meaningfully or not meaningfully. That's our right. That's our will as humans, that we can choose meaning to engage in responsible action, or we can sit on the couch and watch another episode of Netflix. And don't get me wrong, watched a beautiful show the other day with my wife. We found some really good series to watch. This one was cute, it was spiritual, so it's a bunch of comedians got together and did one called God's Favorite Idiot, and it was pretty sweet. I mean, like, genuinely a sweet show, but also pretty funny too. And unfortunately, not one for the kids. A lot of profanity in that one, but a funny show nonetheless. We can choose meaningfully. We can choose. You're choosing meaningfully. Thank you for making this meaningful decision to listen to this podcast, to try to grow, to try to gain some personal insight that ideally leads to greater consciousness for yourself, for your family, your community, and ideally the world. Well, I got to tell you, I timed this one pretty wrong, because Homo Noeticus 1 was, 45 to 60 minutes, And Homo Noeticus 2 looks to be about 20 to 25 minutes. So for you out there listening while you run, make it a short one today, or hop on over to Joe Rogan's podcast with Michio Kaku and see what you think about that. I still haven't finished that one. Maybe I'll get out and listen to the rest of that one today. That's the difference between the good Mr. Rogan and the Meaning Project podcast. He gets to go for 3 hours, but I still have other things to do and clients to see and people to chat with. So for you, if you'd like to have a chat or know what's going on with the Meaning Project and Dr. Dan, hop on over to danielafranz.com, DanielAFranz.com. You can see what I'm reading right now, or maybe what's coming up in future episodes of the podcast. Of course, you can become a supporter on the Patreon page, get you one of those sweet ceramic mugs coming in a few weeks, or this just as sweet but not so ceramic Meaning Project podcast mug. Again, always my pleasure. I hope you find this as meaningful as I do, and you take care.